So I think Australia should have no reason to be surprised about that. And Australia should also not pretend to know about the Chinese military capabilities. No country should ever imagine imposing a nuclear war on China, because while China will not tell you how many nuclear warheads China has, China will have enough nuclear warheads to annihilate the country which dares to impose a nuclear war on China. The testing, as far as I understand, started on July the 6th, one day before the anniversary of what we call July the 7th incident, marking the Japanese full-scale aggression of China on September the 7th, back in the 1930s. This is the main reason, in my best judgment, of why this testing started on July the 6th, one day before this very important anniversary.
大家好，今天要分享的是全球化智库副主任高志凯接受澳大利亚广播公司730栏目专访的一段节选。在这段采访中，面对主持人关于中国远程弹道导弹试验的连环追问，高志凯逐一回应质疑，阐明了中国核试验的合法性与例行性，解读了中国的防御性核战略，也点明了 AUKUS 协议给地区带来的潜在风险。高志凯拥有外交、金融智库多重从业经历，常年活跃于国际舆论场，是国际社会熟知的中国问题专家。下面我们来看看他在本次访谈中是怎么说的。
Let me just ask you this, if I may. How much do you think that this test of a nuclear-capable missile landing in the Pacific will set back China's diplomacy in the Pacific?
Absolutely not. I think China and Pacific countries, especially the island countries, get along with each other very well. We respect each other. We deal with each
and
other.
yet the leaders of the Pacific nations made clear that they objected to China testing a missile of this nature in the Pacific.
Well, in the world of today, in terms of practicality, you may object, but then you need to follow the international rules. The Pacific is not a prohibited region for nuclear testing, and China has absolute legitimacy in doing this kind of testing in the Pacific without violating any international protocol. This is the end of the story, period, and this should not be a hindrance to China-Pacific cooperation. China is a force for international peace. By testing its nuclear capability, China will deter war of all kinds, including nuclear war being imposed on China.
If China was sincere about this being part of China's efforts to bring peace to the world, it would seek to re-engage in international negotiations on nuclear non-proliferation, wouldn't it?
Well, China wants to enter into nuclear renegotiation on the condition that the United States and Russia will agree not to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon countries, against nuclear-free zones, and not being the first country to use nuclear weapons. On that basis, I think China will be perfectly happy to enter into negotiation of any kind with Russia or the United States or both of them, but not on these conditions. China will not enter into negotiations.
Do you expect that we will see further testing of long-range missiles, including airborne long-range missile testing? Is that what we'll see next?
Well, China has already declared to the world its nuclear launch capabilities can touch any corner in any part of the world within 20 minutes or so. So no country should be surprised if China will do such testing in any corner of the world if China decides to do so. And no country should be an obstacle to China's testing like this. And I hope every country in the world, including Australia, should be very happy to see that China's declared nuclear policy is not to use nuclear weapon against any non-nuclear weapon country, against a nuclear-free zone, and China will never use nuclear weapon the first ahead of any other country against other countries. And China will never allow any nuclear power to impose a nuclear war on China without having that country annihilated by the Chinese nuclear capabilities.
These don't sound like terribly peaceful words, but let me just ask you one question. Does Australia's increasing interoperability, that is working alongside with enabling US forces in Australia, make Australia a target for the Chinese military?
Well, at the time when AUKUS was announced, I said publicly on Australian television that Australia should really treasure the luxury of being a nuclear-free country. So my point is very simple. Treasure the nuclear-free zone, free country status for Australia, and make sure that Australia will not be involved in any nuclear confrontation. And a nuclear-powered submarine will be tantamount to be a nuclear submarine in itself, and is a major step into enriching nuclear uranium, etc., and possessing nuclear technologies to be less and less considered as a nuclear-free country. And I want to urge everyone in Australia to do the right thing. Stay away from being a nuclear power, because you do not know what will be the consequence. So I think Australia should have no reason to be surprised about that. And Australia should also not pretend to know about the Chinese military capabilities. No country should ever imagine imposing a nuclear war on China, because while China will not tell you how many nuclear warheads China has, China will have enough nuclear warheads to annihilate the country which dares to impose a nuclear war on China. The testing, as far as I understand, started on July the 6th, one day before the anniversary of what we call July the 7th incident, marking the Japanese full-scale aggression of China on September the 7th, back in the 1930s. This is the main reason, in my best judgment, of why this testing started on July the 6th, one day before this very important anniversary.
看完这段访谈，说实话，最让我感慨的不是双方唇枪舌剑的激烈，而是西方媒体提问里透出来的双重标准。你看，主持人全程带着预设立场，默认中国的导弹试验就是不合常规，破坏稳定，拿着试验间隔、预警时长、太平洋国家的态度反复追问，试图把正常的国防测试塑造成地区威胁。但高志凯的回应全程没掉进话术陷阱，每一句都站在规则和事实上，不卑不亢。先说第一个争议，试验到底算不算例行公事？主持人拿单款导弹的试射间隔说上次是2024年，再往前是80年代，算不上例行。但这是典型的偷换概念。中国是核大国，导弹型号、发射平台种类繁多，陆基、海基、空基试验常年推进，只是具体到某一款，试射频率不高而已。公海试射不针对第三国，完全符合国际惯例，本来就是核大国的正常操作。再说说澳方抱怨的预警时间短，高志凯说得很清楚，中国已经按国际惯例提前通知了相关国家，已经尽到了义务和礼节。有意思的是，美国满世界军演试射洲际导弹的时候，从没见澳大利亚跳出来说预警不够，破坏稳定。美国拉着澳大利亚搞 AUKUS， 推进核潜艇项目的时候，澳大利亚也没觉得这会加剧地区紧张。自己跟着搞军事扩张，默不作声。中国在公海做正常试验就大呼小叫，这是典型的双重标准。还有试验时机的阴谋论，暗示中国针对澳匪防务协议试射导弹更是站不住脚。高志凯直接点出了关键，试验选在7月6日，是7.7事变纪念日的前一天。对中国人而言，这个日子承载着沉重的民族记忆。在这样的节点开展国防测试，是铭记历史，也是警示未来。把这样的历史节点硬扯成针对双边协议的示威，既不了解中国，也太小看了中国的格局。顺便补充一个很多人忽略的细节，中国是全球所有核大国里唯一一个从拥有核武器第一天起就公开承诺不首先使用核武器，不对无核国家使用核武器的国家。这份承诺坚守了半个多世纪，从未动摇。反观美俄等国，至今保留先发制人的核打击选项，甚至不断研发小当量核武器，降低核战争门槛。到底谁在维护和平，谁在制造风险？答案一目了然。最后说到 AUKUS 协议，才是这期访谈最有警示意义的部分。高志凯的提醒非常直白， 引进核动力潜艇意味着澳大利亚要掌握核燃料与核技术，等于一步步撕掉自身无核国家的标签。现在为了站队踩这条红线，未来要承担怎样的后果，没人能打包票，放着和平发展的路不走，非要卷进大国对抗的漩涡，到底值不值得？澳大利亚其实该想清楚。其实整段访谈的核心逻辑特别朴素，手里有剑和有剑不用从来不是一回事儿。中国发展国防力量从来不是为了挑起争端，而是为了确保没人敢把战争强加到我们头上。太平洋足够广阔，容得下各国共同发展。地区和平靠的是相互尊重，不是拉帮结派搞阵营对抗。好了，这期视频就到这里了。制作视频不易，如果您觉得做得不错，谢谢您动动手指订阅本频道。如果您有更多想法或者建议，也可以在评论区告诉我，都会认真阅读。下期见。